All right, everyone, let's talk about some extremely important mid-game goals in Raid Shadow Legends. Now, these are going to be very important for those of you guys who are kind of transitioning from the early game to the mid-game content, but those of you guys who consider yourselves end-game players already, you're probably not really going to get a whole lot out of this. You might still learn a few new things here and there, but I just thought I would say this as a bit of a disclaimer here at the start. Now, with that being said, let's get into some really important stuff that you're going to want to know as you get into the mid-game. And let's start off with number one, very important as you do transition from the early game to the mid-game, and that is to keep track of your time-gated content roadblocks. Now, this is going to be important because as you transition from the early game to the mid-game, your goals are going to really start to slow down. Things are going to start to take longer, and it's going to be very important for you to keep track of things that are going to be time-gated. Now, the examples that I can use for this are going to be your progress missions and your challenges. Now, if you've taken a look at your progress missions, you'll see that there are certain points in the actual progress missions where you can only actually do them during certain times of the week. It's going to have you go into things like the dungeons and clear the Spirit Keep, which only opens twice per week, or even things like the Void Keep, which only actually opens once per week. And the game actually designs the progress missions and challenges to try to take as long as possible. So it's going to be very important that you keep track of the periods in your progress missions where you are going to be roadblocked by something that you can only do during a certain day of the week. Make sure that you do those during those days of the week, because if you accidentally skip over it or forget, then you're going to have to wait many more days for you to get back to that point. So definitely keep track of it. And the rewards in the progress missions, they might not seem super amazing at the start, but they definitely ramp up as you get to the later stages, and overall they are going to help out your account progress a pretty decent amount. So definitely keep track of this stuff. Now let's move on to number two. Now, this is a really important one because you are going to spend a lot of the time in the mid-game in the campaign. Now, as you enter the mid-game and as you transition from the early game to the mid-game, you're going to be spending a lot of time farming the campaign stages for two things. First of all, you're going to be farming for silver, of course, because that's going to be used to upgrade your artifacts, which is going to improve the power on your champions and help you conquer those more difficult goals. But also, you're going to be farming experience for food to level and rank up champions to diversify your teams to also be able to conquer those goals. So you're going to be spending a lot of time in the campaign. Now, naturally, a lot of people think that an incredibly important mid-game goal is to have a campaign farmer be able to farm the campaign in 7 to 8 seconds. And I will say that having a good campaign farmer is very important for the mid-game. I would say that it definitely doesn't need to be able to farm it in 7 to 8 seconds or so. Now, the reason why I say that is because the more limiting resource when it comes to campaign farming isn't going to be how many seconds it takes for you to farm stage 3 or stage 6. It's going to be the actual amount of energy that you have. And energy only regenerates at a rate of 1 every 3 minutes. So with campaign stages costing 8 energy, at 3 minutes per, it's going to take 24 minutes for you to regenerate the amount of energy that it takes to run one campaign stage. So the difference between running it in 8 seconds or 20 seconds, it's not really that big of a deal unless you're going to spend all day refilling your energy. In that case, then yes, it's definitely going to be important to have a faster campaign farmer, but for the majority of players, we're probably not going to be spending all day refilling our energy, so being able to run the campaign in 7 or 8 seconds, not going to be as big of a priority for the mid game. Now, I say that because as you get to the end game, then it's definitely going to be more of an end game goal. But for the mid game, as long as you have a campaign farmer that can farm it in a reasonable amount of time, I would say under a minute or so, your energy is really going to be the big roadblock and not the amount of seconds that it takes for you to farm the campaign stage. So I thought that I would say that because I think a lot of people focus on this in the mid game and kind of ignore a lot of other important things rather than focusing it on the end game, where I personally believe it kind of belongs a little bit more. So that's going to end up being number 2. Now moving on to number 3, this is going to be pretty similar to that same idea of a campaign farmer, except now more along the lines for an arena team. Very similarly, you don't need an absolutely amazing arena team in order to effectively farm medals. Now, you're going to be able to refresh your arena teams every 15 minutes, and your arena medals only regenerate at a rate of 1 every hour. You are going to get some free medals, though, from your daily missions. You'll get 5 of them here, and also from your 3 hours of login rewards. But still, the amount of arena medals that you're going to end up getting from your natural regeneration each day versus how many refills, or sorry, how many refreshes you're going to be able to use. You get one of these every 15 minutes. The amount of arena teams that you're going to be able to actually see, you really don't need an absolutely amazing arena team in order to effectively farm medals. Even in Gold 4, as long as your team is good enough, as long as you're occasionally seeing 1 or 2 teams every refresh that you think you can take on, you're not going to have any kind of a problem keeping up with your actual arena tokens and making sure that you're getting as many medals as you can. Now, very similarly to campaign, if you are refreshing your arena medals with gems or with arena bags like this, then that's a different story. You're probably going to want a better team to be able to conquer more of your enemies to farm effectively, but for the majority of players, we're probably not going to be spending gems and resources refilling our arena tokens all day long, so it's not going to be as big of a priority. As long as our team's good enough to occasionally beat a couple of lineups here and there, that's going to be totally fine for the mid game, even in Gold 4. So that's going to end up being number 3. Now moving on to number 4, very important. As you transition from the early game to the mid game, things are going to start to slow down. Your goals are going to start to take longer, and overall progress is definitely going to be a bit different. So it's going to be very important to keep track of time-gated stuff or time-limited stuff, things like your clan boss key timers. And I wanted to use this as an example because clan boss keys regenerate at a rate of 1 every 6 hours. So if you keep track of your clan boss keys really well, you can actually get 4 of them per day. And this is something that I do very well, or at least I try to, is I have my clan boss keys regenerate at very specific times to know exactly when that time is so that I can make sure to get the full use out of all 4 of my free keys each day. And the reason why I say this is important for mid-game progress is because you're going to get a lot of really useful stuff from the clan boss that are going to help progress your account. You actually get a pretty decent amount of shards. I get a pretty good amount of ancient shards and even void shards, even from the easier bosses in the clan boss. Still a good amount of rewards, especially if you're getting the double chests. You're going to get your tomes, rare tomes, epic tomes. Occasionally you'll get legendary tomes if you are farming Nightmare, but still, you want to keep track of this stuff. Your goals are going to take longer, things are going to be slower, and min-maxing the amount of free stuff that you get that normally would cost money, like shards and tomes from the clan boss, is going to be very, very important as you enter the mid-game. So definitely make sure you keep track of your time-limited resources like that. So that's going to be number 4. All right, now number 5. This is another really big one, and I would say this is probably more along the lines of a mistake that I see a lot of people in the mid-game make, and that is to not overfarm content if you're really close to conquering a big hurdle. Now, what I mean by that is, let's just say that you are farming one of the earlier dragon stages, like you're farming dragon 8, 9, 10, 11, something along those lines, right? You know, one of these stages here, but you're really close to being able to beat these stages, and you're really close to being able to move up to, you know, stage 11, stage 12, something along those lines. You don't want to overfarm content when you're really close to being able to move forward to the next one, because you're going to get a lot more efficiency out of your energy and better rewards. And in the mid-game, efficiency is going to be extremely, extremely important. I would say it's always important in Raid Shadow Legends, but as your goals kind of start to slow down and things take longer, you're going to get more out of being more efficient in the game, and that includes making sure that you are getting as much as you can out of dungeons, out of the campaign. The same thing applies to campaign. You know, if you are farming the hard campaign, and you are really close to being able to farm the brutal campaign, you don't want to over farm hard, because as you move from hard to brutal, you're now going to get more efficiency out of your energy. And it's only, you know, 10, 15, 20% or so. I don't remember what the exact amount is going from hard to brutal, but that 10, 15, or 20% adds up to be a whole lot of additional efficiency. And especially considering that your goals are going to take a lot longer in the mid game, that additional efficiency really adds up to be quite a bit over the long term. So definitely want to focus on that. And if you are close to beating a roadblock, you want to try to get over that roadblock as soon as you possibly can, instead of over farming it. So that's going to be a big one for the mid game, and even honestly for the late game as well. All right, goals become much more long-term. This has kind of been the theme of the video so far, and that's why it's going to be even more important at this point to save your shards. Now, I would say that it's always going to be important to save your shards. I always like to talk about how great the double rates event is and how amazing it is to save shards for that. If you're an extremely early game player and you don't really have any champions on your roster, I think it's totally okay to summon a couple of shards here and there to try to get a couple of champions, just to try to help you conquer the early game, things like the normal and the hard campaign. But as you enter the mid game, because your goals are going to start to slow down, now you're going to want to get more efficiency out of everything, and summoning shards is no exception. So it's going to be very important at this point to try to be patient, try to save up your shards just like I do as best as I can. As you guys can see, I really don't do that many summons. I have very few summoning videos on the channel. I think only 2 or 3 out of the 75 plus Raid Shadow Legends videos that I have are summoning related, and you want to try to get as much efficiency out of your shards as possible when you get to the mid and late game. So shards are no exception to everything that I've talked about in this video so far. And finally, last up on the list is try to have fun and maybe even make some of your own goals. Now, this is something that I personally did. You don't have to do this, of course. You could just stick to the traditional goals in the game, things like beating the Brutal and Nightmare campaign, beating the highest stages of dungeons, faction wars, fighting the Nightmare and Ultra Nightmare clan boss daily. Those are going to be more of the traditional goals, but you can even think of your own goals. Maybe it'll help you enjoy the game more. This is something that I personally did, and I talked about this in one of my recent that was actually the 20,000 subscriber Q&A special, where I talked about why I have so many crazy champions leveled up, ranked up, even the bad ones. And again, this is just kind of one of my personal goals. I like to collect. This is a collection mobile game, and there's a lot of really cool, interesting champions in Raid Shadow Legends. Even though they might not be good combat-wise, they are still fun to collect, and I enjoy this aspect of the game, which is why I do it. So it's just kind of one of my side goals, and it helps me enjoy the game more. Now, like I said, you don't have to do this. It's not mandatory, but the mid game, and as you get from the mid game to the late game, as you kind of conquer more and more of the game's traditional goals, it's going to open up the opportunity to kind of explore maybe your own personal goals. So I would say think about it. You don't have to, but that option is definitely going to be there for you as you do transition from the early game to the mid game. So with that being said, that is going to be it for the video today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Really hoping that you guys enjoyed these tips for mid-game players. And if you did, consider subscribing to the channel. Really appreciate it, everyone. If you want to help out, toss a quick like. It means more than you can even imagine. And of course, if you're interested in more Raid Shadow Legends videos, there should be plenty of them popping up on the screen right about now. Plenty of them in the suggested videos, and over 75 Raid Shadow Legends videos on the channels. Have a fantastic day, everyone. Take care, and until next time, this is Salt of the Salty Guild, signing out.